today's class. So I hope yesterday we had an interesting session. So today we are going to continue from where we left yesterday. So yesterday we began our class, our session concerning antibiotics. But first we had to have a brief summary on the appearance of a bacteria, how a bacteria looks like and how it functions, with a lot of emphasis placed on the cell wall of the bacteria, the cell membrane of the bacteria, and also the nucleus of the bacteria. Apart from that, also we discussed the two main broad categories of bacteria, that is the gram-positive and the gram-negative, and we also looked at the major difference when it comes to the cell wall, the cell membrane of the two groups. So yesterday, uh, being completed, we want to come to today's class concerning now antibiotic. The table below will be a brief summary of the common antibiotics that we use. Remember, a small reminder is that antibiotics are drugs that work against the bacteria. They either stop the growth of the bacteria, and this we call them bacteriostatic, or they either kill the bacteria. In simple terms, we can refer to them as bactericidal. So today we're going to look on how these antibiotics work when it comes to fighting or stopping the bacteria. So the table below basically is a table containing 3 columns. The first column is the name. The second column is the indication, and the third is the side effects. So this table will just try and come up with the classification of the antibiotics and the specific names. We also look at some of the indications. Why do we use a particular antibiotic against a particular bacteria? And lastly, we are going to look at some of the common side effects when it comes to using a particular antibiotic. So yesterday I gave you 3 common terms that you have to remind yourself on. The first one is that when it comes to bacteria, most antibiotics work against 3 specific sites. The first site is always the cell wall, another one is the cell membrane, and lastly the nucleus. So we have to look on how the bacteria works when it comes to attacking the cell of the bacteria, or when it comes to attacking the cell membrane, and lastly the nucleus. So the first row I will read the cell wall. So the first session we're going to look today, we're going to look at some of the antibiotics that work against the cell wall. Remember that yesterday class I told you that the cell wall is majorly composed of peptidoglycan layer. This is a very strong layer that gives the bacteria a mechanical outlet, a mechanical layer. So when it comes to cell wall, the first group that you have to understand is that we're going to look at some of the antibiotics that decrease the synthesis of peptidoglycan. We're going to begin by looking at some of the common antibiotics that work by decreasing the synthesis of peptidoglycan. Now, here we've got 2 major antibiotics. One is very common, you guys know it, is vancomycin, and another one is called physiomycin. So these 2 antibiotics, the major work is to prevent the synthesis of peptidoglycan. The mechanism of action is to prevent the manufacture of peptidoglycan. And remember, when the bacteria is unable to manufacture its peptidoglycan, it means that the cell wall will lose its durability or its strength. So it will be easy for the bacteria to lose its content. So one of the major drugs that work by decreasing the manufacturing of the peptidoglycan layer is the vancomycin and the physiomycin. Now, these 2 drugs are very common, specifically vancomycin. I know that you guys have come across it in a facility or in an exam or in your classes. It's a very common antibiotic that is majorly used, especially when dealing with MRSA. It's a very good drug against MRSA. MRSA, for those who are new, it basically means methicillin resistant staph aureus. So if you hear the word MRSA, it means methicillin resistant staph aureus. These are these bacteria are very much resistant when it comes to methicillin, but nowadays methicillin is not used. But vancomycin, if a client has come to the facility and he has an infection, a bacterial infection, you do the culture and we find that there's a MRSA, vancomycin is one of the drugs that will or can be used. This vancomycin also is very much commonly used when it comes to fighting gram-positive bacteria. Other gram-positive bacteria can be, we can also use the vancomycin, be it staph, genus staph, strep, or the enterococcus. You can use the vancomycin. Another one is the C. difficile or the Clostridium difficile. Clostridium difficile, the spelling, I think it's double F. Yeah. So when it comes to Clostridium difficile, number one, vancomycin is always given in IV formulation, but there's an exemption. When the client has got C. difficile, we tend to use the oral route, the oral vancomycin. So oral vancomycin is always used to tackle or to deal with the C difficile or the Clostridium difficile for those who are new to the class. So these are the indications of using the vancomycin. When it comes to MRSA, it's very much effective against methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, and it's also effective when dealing with the C. difficile and other gram-positive bacteria. Yeah, so that's what you should know. Vancomycin very much effective against the MRSA and the C. difficile, but you have to know that when it comes to treating C. difficile, we always use the oral vancomycin. So the major side effects, number one, very common, is the nephrotoxicity. So when the client is using vancomycin, especially when it's combined with other drugs that are nephrotoxic, like the aminoglycoside, you have to check or to monitor the renal function by checking the BUNs and the creatinine levels. So when there's elevation of those BUNs and creatinine levels, then the drug has to be stopped, or we have to change the antibiotic to another one that is much safer. So nephrotoxicity is one of the side effects when it comes to using vancomycin. Another one is the ototoxicity. So when the client is using vancomycin, you have to monitor the hearing function because these drugs tends to be ototoxic. And lastly is the Redman syndrome. Now when it comes to Redman syndrome, here it happens when you give a rapid IV infusion of vancomycin. That's why we always tend to advise those who are administering this drug to give it to not administer it rapidly, yeah, because when you give it rapidly, it may manifest with Redman syndrome. So those are some of the common side effects when it comes to using the drugs, the vancomycin. So I hope you're together. So the first one is the drugs that decrease the synthesis of the peptidoglycans. Now the second category, under cell wall, we're looking at the drugs that decrease the cross-linking of the decreasing the cross-linking of peptidoglycan. Yeah, and these drugs, these antibiotics, always refer to them as the beta-lactams. They've got a beta-lactam ring that makes them effective. So the second group of class are those that decrease the cross-linking of peptidoglycan, and they do this by binding to penicillin binding proteins that are found in the cell membrane. And when they do that, they interrupt the structure of the cell wall, making the bacteria lose its viability. So that's what this is so this basically refers to the drugs that work by decreasing the cross-linking of peptidoglycan, and it has various subgroups. And the first group that you're going to look at are the natural penicillins. This is the first subgroup, the natural penicillin. Now here we have got two major ones. We have got the pen G and the pen V. But to use for the sake of the scientific word, the first group we always refer to them as benzyl penicillin, or to make it easier for you, just refer to them as pen G. Now these ones, the major difference is that they're always administered parenterally. Administered parenterally. This means they can be given either through IV route or through IM route. And you've got other classification like the procaine and the benzathine, yeah, which we have to administer them IM. Very much effective. Like the benzathine penicillin is very much effective when it comes to treating syphilis. So the first major group of natural penicillins, the benzyl penicillins, or you can refer to them as pen G. The second group of penicillin is the phenoxymethylpenicillin. The phenoxymethylpenicillin. But we can also refer to them as the pen V. Now, the major difference between these two classifications is that the pen V are always administered orally. They can be administered, orally. So that's the major difference. So if when it comes to natural penicillin, you have to look at, is it pen G or pen V? Pen G is administered parenterally, that's either through IM route or IV route. The pen V is administered orally. Now these penicillins, natural penicillin, are very much effective against gram-positive bacteria. They're effective against gram-positive bacteria. But they can also be used against some gram-negative bacteria. Yeah. So natural penicillin are very much effective against gram-positive bacteria and some gram-negative bacteria. Yeah. So that's the indication of using natural penicillin against gram-positive bacteria and gram-negative bacteria. Now, the major side effects when it comes to using natural penicillin, the first one, which is very common, is hypersensitivity. So you have to check, is this client allergic to penicillin? If the client is allergic to penicillin, then you have to use another antibiotic. Hypersensitivity. So you have to check, is the client allergic? When there's a documented allergic reaction, the client cannot use the penicillin, which is very common. Then another one is neurotoxicity. So this majorly happens when there's an overdose or when there's increased levels of penicillins in the bloodstream. It may exhibit some symptoms like Schiz activities. So it's always neurotoxic in high levels. Then there's others like there's this one that is very hard to pronounce. Darishexma. Another common reaction when it comes to using penicillins. So these are examples of the common reaction when it comes to using penicillin as a drug. So check for hypersensitivity, neurotoxicity, or the Hexheimer reaction. Is a very hard word to pronounce. Yeah, but I hope the message is home. So that's all about natural penicillin. Now let's move to another beta-lactam antibiotic, and that will be the anti-staphylococcus penicillin. The anti-staphylococcus penicillin. The anti-staphylococcus penicillin. An example of drugs that fall under this category include, number one, this one is very common, flucloxacillin. Yeah, flucloxacillin. Another one is nafcillin. Yes, another one is dicloxacillin. Yeah. Another one, you've got oxacillin, and cloxacillin. So those are those are some of the examples of anti-staphylococcus penicillin. Let me just highlight this with in green to bring uniformity. Yeah, and this one here. Yes. Yeah, so let me just highlight this one, vancomycin in green and phaseomycin also in green. Yeah, sorry for the delay. Yeah, now this example of the drugs that fall under anti-staphylococcus penicillin. The fluoxacillin, also called fluoxapen in your rotation, or drugs that you commonly see being used. You've got the nafcillin, I've got the dicloxacillin, I've got the oxacillin, and also you have the cloxacillin. Now these drugs, they're majorly indicated against MSSA. What does MSSA mean? This one, it means methicillin sensitive staphylococcus aureus. Methicillin sensitive staphylococcus aureus. You have to know that methicillin, long time ago, methicillin used to fall under this category, but it was stopped due to uh, because it's extremely nephrotoxic. So nowadays you rarely see methicillin being used. But simpler, these the groups, the drugs under this category, they're always very much effective when it comes to dealing with MSSA, methicillin sensitive staphylococcus aureus. Yeah. So this bacteria tends to cause majorly causes estomolitis. Very common in estomolitis. Spelling is estomolitis. Yeah, or also can be found in endocarditis. So if a client has got a bacterial estomolitis, the major culprit is always MSSA, and the best drug to use is drugs that fall under the anti-staphylococcus penicillin. They're very much effective when it comes to dealing with MSSA. So I hope you're together till there. I hope we are together. Now, some of the common reactions, same as natural penicillin, there's always hypersensitivity. Hypersensitivity is one of the reactions that you can come across. We also have thrombophlebitis. We can also have neutropenia, but this tends to happen majorly when using neutropenia tends to majorly happen when using nafcillin. Major culprit of neutropenia is nafcillin. So these are the three major side effects when it comes to using anti-staphylococcus penicillins. Yeah, so that's all about the anti-staphylococcus penicillin. So another group of beta-lactam antibiotics that you have to tackle is the aminopenicillins. And the two major drugs that are found that sorry, let me just correct the spelling. Aminopenicillin. So two major drugs that fall under this category, we have the amoxicillin, amoxy, and ampicillin. These are the two major drugs that are found under this category. Amoxy is always found on oral. It's majorly administered orally. I'm very sure you've come across amoxicillin. Very common, especially when dealing with pneumonia. The amoxicillin is always tends to be administered orally. Ampicillin always come in at the IV/IM formulation. So that's the major difference between the two. Now, these drugs are good when it comes to dealing with gram-positive bacteria. They're very good when dealing with gram-positive bacteria, and also gram-negative. But there's something that I want you guys to note. Bacteria always adapt when it comes to antibiotics. And one major adaptation is they always form an enzyme that works against antibiotics. One major enzyme that bacteria tend to have is the beta-lactamase enzyme. This enzyme, it always destroys the bacteriolactam antibiotics. Now, that being said, the amoxicillin and the ampicillin, they're highly sensitive. They're always highly sensitive when it comes to beta-lactamase enzyme. To beta-lactamase. They're very sensitive to beta-lactamase. Yeah. That being said, we always give these two drugs with a beta-lactamase inhibitors. So we always combine these two with, we always combined with a beta-lactamase inhibitor. Yeah, an example of this, we have the inhibitor. The spelling is an issue. So two major ones are the clavulanic acid, which is always combined with amoxicillin to form augmentin called augmentin, and we also have the sulbactam. I think that's the spelling, sulbactam. Yeah. So the clavulanic acid is always combined. Is always combined with amoxi. Yeah. While the sulbactam is always combined with ampicillin. Sulbactam always combined with ampicillin. I hope you're correct till there. So when it comes to these drugs, number one, this classification, we have the amoxicillin and the ampicillin. These drugs are good against gram-positive bacteria and gram-negative, but they're extremely sensitive to beta-lactamase. So that being said, we always combine them with beta-lactamase inhibitors. That's the clavulanic acid and the sulbactam. So the clavulanic acid we always combine with the amoxicillin to form amoxiclav or the augmentin. The sulbactam we always combine it with ampicillin to form the unacin. I hope that message is taken home. So that are the two major drugs that fall under this category. Now, apart from that, we are going also to look at the side effects of these drugs. So same with other penicillins, these drugs tend to have hypersensitivity. That's one of the major side effects when it comes to using these drugs. The first one is hypersensitivity. That's one of the major side effects when it comes to using these drugs. Another one, we have got the GI distress. Why is this common? This is majorly common with ampicillin because ampicillin tends to affect the normal flora in the gut. Yeah, so it's majorly common with the when using ampicillin, because ampicillin, destroys the gut flora. That's why we tend to have a lot of GI distress, especially when using ampicillin. So those are the two major side effects when it comes to using aminopenicillin. Now, the next classification, the next beta-lactam antibiotics, we have the anti-pseudomonal. The spelling, pseudomonal. The anti-pseudomonal penicillins. Now, these ones, they were majorly made to deal with Pseudomonas aeruginosa. They are very much effective when it comes to dealing with Pseudomonas aeruginosa. An example of these drugs that are anti-pseudomonas penicillin, we have got the piperacillin. So the first one is the piperacillin, the piperacillin. We also have ticagrelin, another drug that falls under this category. Another one that we have is the meslocillin, and also azlocillin. But there's one thing that you have to note, that just like the aminopenicillin, piperacillin is always piperacillin, or these drugs also, they're always sensitive to beta-lactamase. That being said, one of the majorly used drugs under this category is the piperacillin, and it's always combined with tazobactam, a beta-lactamase inhibitor, tazobactam. So combined. Let me add a plus sign here to make it more easier to understand. A plus that I think should be better. So give piperacillin tazobactam, because it's also sensitive to beta-lactamase. Now, that being said, So these drugs, the main target here, main indication, it's always Pseudomonas aeruginosa. This is the major target when it comes to using anti-pseudomonal penicillins. But it's also effective against gram-positive bacteria, and also and other gram-negative. Yeah. So that's all when it comes to anti-pseudomonal penicillins. But I think you have to note one thing, is that these drugs, when it comes to side effects, there's not much difference when it comes to like other penicillins, given that this drug also leads to hypersensitivity. So when a client is sensitive to penicillin, also you can't give this drug. Yeah, it will lead to reaction and anaphylaxis. So you can't give this drug here. So the first one is sorry. This should be in blue, not red. Sorry for that mix up. Now, so one of the major reaction is hypersensitivity. Hypersensitivity is one of the major reactions when it comes to using this drug. Another one is bleeding. Why? Because some of them, they always cause platelet dysfunction. They may cause platelets dysfunction. So that being said, you have to be very keen when using this drug. And lastly, also they may also cause neurotoxicity. So this drug also cause neurotoxicity, especially when there's high levels in blood while using this drug. So you have to note those side effects. Now, another classifications of beta-lactam antibiotics we have is the cephalosporins. And here we have got five generations. The first one, so the first generation of this group we have is the cefazolin. We also have cephalexin. So cefazolin, cephalexin are the first gen. When it comes to second generation, here we have cefuroxime. We also have cefacla, and also have cefoxitin. So those are the major second generation cephalosporins. When it comes to third gen, which is very, very much popular, here now the first one is ceftriaxone, very common. One thing that you have to note, ceftriaxone has got a very good CNS penetration. This being said, it's very much effective when dealing with bacterial meningitis. So you have to know that ceftriaxone has got a very good CNS penetration. So when treating meningitis, we tend to the most preferential drug when it comes to dealing with bacterial meningitis is the ceftriaxone. We also have ceftazidime, another commonly used cephalosporin. Another one is cefixime, and you also have cefotaxime. So those are some of the examples of third generation cephalosporins. Now another one is the fourth. So let me just rest the screen. It's the fourth generation. Now here we have one drug called the cefepime. That's the example of the fourth generation cephalosporin. When it comes to fifth generation cephalosporin, here we have the ceftaroline and the ceftobiprole. So the ceftaroline and the ceftobiprole. So these are some of the examples of cephalosporin: the first gen, the second gen, the third gen, the fourth gen, and the fifth generation. So cephalosporins are good drugs and are very much effective against gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. but you have to note they are very good against MRSA, methicillin resistant Staph aureus. And this one, the best category when it comes to MRSA, you have to use the 5th gen. So the 5th generation cephalosporins are very good against methicillin resistant Staph aureus, or the MRSA. I hope that message is taken home. When it comes to side effects, there's not much difference, like just other beta-lactam antibiotics. The hypersensitivity is one of the common side effect. Hypersensitivity. Another one is also the gastrointestinal effects. That's another common side effect that you have to look into. It may also cause thrombophlebitis, especially when given intravenously. Thrombophlebitis. It may also cause neurotoxicity, yeah, in high levels, and many other side effects. So those are some of the examples of the side effects when it comes to using the cephalosporins. Yeah, now let's continue with another classification of the beta-lactam antibiotics. Another one that we have is the carbapenems. Carbapenems. Yeah. Now here, example of drugs under this category that form under carbapenems, we have the meropenem, which is very commonly used. Meropenem. We have the imipenem. We have the doripenems, and also the etapenem. Yeah. So these are some of the examples of carbapenems: the meropenems, imipenems, and the etapenem. Yeah. So the indications. So these drugs are highly resistant to most beta-lactamases. So they're very good when it comes to dealing with ESBLs. What does this stand for? This stands for extended spectrum beta-lactamases. They're very good when dealing with ESBLs. They're also good against gram-positive and gram-negative. So those are the indications when it comes to using carbapenems. They're very good drugs. They tend to be used as the last resort. Very powerful drugs, very much powerful drugs. They're very good drugs when it comes to dealing with bacteria that are resistant towards various antibiotics. This is one of the good drugs that you can use: the meropenems, the imipenems, the doripenems, and the etapenems. Very good drugs. Now, when it comes to side effects, same. Hypersensitivity is one of the major side effects. Also, the GI distress. It may cause nausea, vomiting. There's one thing that I want to touch on. When back to cephalosporins. Cephalosporins also, they may cause nausea, vomiting, especially the ceftriaxone. When administered intravenously rapidly, it tends to cause nausea and vomiting. So that nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Yeah, that you have to note. So they always tend to have GI distress. Yeah, and remember, these drugs also tend to interfere with the gut flora. That's why the GI effects is very much common when it comes to using antibiotics. Yeah. So another one here, apart from GI effects, the carbapenems also tends to be neurotoxic in high levels. Neurotoxicity. They're also neurotoxic. They may also cause some blood dyscarrias. Yeah. Blood dyscarria. Blood dyscarrias. It's not the spelling, dyscrasias. Blood dyscrasias. Yeah. This means it may cause anemia. They may cause anemia and thrombocytopenia, low platelet level. Thrombocytopenia. Yeah, so those are some of the major side effects when it comes to using the carbapenems. Let me just highlight them in red. Yeah, so that's all about the carbapenems. Now, the last example of beta-lactam antibiotics are the monobactams. The monobactams. And here we have the aztreonam. Aztreonam is the now. One thing that you have to note, the reason why you've got aztreonam, it's always an alternative for serious gram-negative bacteria with documented penicillin allergy. Severe penicillin allergy. Yeah, so that's what you have to note. So aztreonam is majorly used. Is active only. This drug is only active when dealing with. It's only active on gram-negative aerobes. It's only active against gram-negative aerobes, like the Pseudomonas aeruginosa, like the E. coli, like the Klebsiella, and the Proteus. The drug that is majorly used here is aztreonam. It's always an alternative when clients are allergic to penicillin. You can use aztreonam. Yeah. Side effects here very common: GI upsets. Yeah. This drug is also hepatotoxic. Hepatotoxicity. So when you're giving this drug, you have to look at the LFTs. Yeah. Then also it may cause phlebitis when administered intravenously. So those are some of the common side effects when it comes to using aztreonam. When it comes to using the aztreonam, yeah. Let me just so that only active against gram-negative aerobes. They're very good. They're only active against gram-negative aerobes. Only active on gram-negative aerobes, yeah. And they always used as an alternative for those clients who have got a severe allergy towards penicillin. There's one thing that I forgot to add. Sorry. Now, when it comes to carbapenems, these are very good drugs. I always call them bomb blasts. Yeah, they are always the last resort when it comes to dealing with bacteria that are resistant towards other penicillins. But one thing that you have to note here is that there's one drug called imipenem. Imipenem is always easily degraded by the kidneys, and that being said, we always give imipenem with another drug called cilastatin. So imipenem is always co-administered, always administered with cilastatin. Cilastatin. Why cilastatin? Why is this so? This is to prevent its breakdown in the kidneys, to prevent its renal degradation. Yeah. So imipenem, we always give imipenem with cilastatin just to make it more efficient and to prevent its breakdown by the kidneys. Yeah. So that's a very important point to note. Let me put it in italics. Yeah. So and here let me highlight this one in green to have a good clear outlook on it. Yeah. So I think I'm almost done. Yeah, so that's all. Now, so today we have checked or have looked on cell wall. So the antibiotics that are used that are very much effective when it comes to dealing with the cell wall of the bacteria are under two big categories. There are those that decrease the synthesis of peptidoglycans. Those include the vancomycin and the fusimycin. We also have those that decrease the cross-linking of peptidoglycans, and this they do by binding to the penicillin binding proteins, yeah, destroying the structural component of the bacteria. So these ones are the beta-lactam antibiotics. And here we have the natural penicillins, the pen G, which is given parenterally, and the pen V, which is given orally. We have got the anti-staphylococcus penicillin, which are very much effective when it comes to MSSA. Here you have the flucloxacillin, the nafcillin, the decloxacillin, the oxacillin, and the cloxacillin. We also have the aminopenicillins. Here we have got two major drugs, the amoxicillin and the ampicillin. These two drugs are very good when it comes to dealing with the gram-positive bacteria and the gram-negative, but they are highly sensitive to beta-lactamase. That being said, we always give this drug in combination with beta-lactamase inhibitors like the clavulanic acid or the sulbactam. That's why you come across augmentin. Augmentin is the amoxiclav, where we have the amoxicillin combined with the clavulanic acid to make it much more effective. We also have the anti-pseudomonal penicillin, the peptazole, the piperacillin, and the tazobactam. We've got the ticacillins, the meslocillin, and the azlocillins. They are very good against Pseudomonas aeruginosa, but they can also be used against gram-positive bacteria and other gram-negative bacteria. Next, we have got the cephalosporins, very much popular. You have got the first generation, second, third, fourth, and fifth generations. But nowadays, I think the third gen is majorly used. You have got the ceftriaxone, the ceftazidime, the cefixime, and the cefotaxime. Here you have to know that the ceftriaxone is very much effective, very much used, especially because of its good sinus penetration. It's very good against meningitis, but it's also used prophylactically for those guys who go to theater. I've seen ceftriaxone being given intravenously before client in pre-op when preparing a client for a surgery. We also have the carbapenems last resort. They are very ruthless bactericidal drugs. We have the meropenem, the imipenem, the doripenem, the etapenems. But the imipenem, because it's always degraded by the kidneys, we always give it in combination with cilastatin to prevent it from being broken down by the kidney. Yeah, and lastly, for the monobactams, the aztreonam. The aztreonam, it's always used as an alternative for those clients who have got severe penicillin allergy. But it's only effective against gram-negative aerobes, the likes of Pseudomonas, the likes of E. coli, the likes of Klebsiella, Proteus, and others. So side effects, majorly, when it comes to beta-lactamase inhibitors, you have to look at the hypersensitivity reaction. You also have to look at the GI distress because these drugs tend to destroy the gut flora. I think that's a summary of cell wall. So I think today we have completed our class on the cell wall. So next time I'm going to look at some of the antibiotics that are very much effective when it comes to dealing with the cell membrane. I hope you enjoyed our class. I'm going to make it much better. Currently, I've got an issue with the voice. With time, I'm going to improve on the voice. There are a lot of echoes, but we'll improve when times allows. Thank you for this session. I enjoyed this session. I hope you enjoyed this session. If you're a newcomer, please ensure that you subscribe to my channel. We're going to